Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. I hope everybody is staying warm out there. It is dumping snow in Fort Collins. We've been relatively dry up to this point. I know Denver's just been getting hit hard for like a day now. Sounds like it's going to be a cold, snowy weekend, but that's when it's a perfect time to, watch some college basketball, cozy up on the couch, watch some college football action, especially with the Rams on a bye week. We're going to give some historical context between CSU Wyoming. I'm going to talk once again about why this rivalry is so important to me. We're going to talk about some of the key moments in the history. I'm going to give out some information you need to know about the 2024 Cowboys. But before we do that, we are going to focus on hoops a little bit. CSU hosting Tennessee State tonight on the men's side. The women will be hosting Oregon State. Oregon State is a team that made the Sweet 16 last year. A completely different roster, but still a big challenge for this group led by Ryan Williams. Fun to have the double header. I don't anticipate that the attendance is going to be stellar tonight in Moby, just given the road conditions. Completely understandable. There's just going to be a lot of people that aren't going to be able to make it up to FOCO for a 7:30 game. But you will be able to stream it on the Mountain West Network if you are not going to be there in person. Some information on Tennessee State. Admittedly, know very little about this group. Not a team that I've ever seen play before. They have an entire new roster from last year, so even going back and trying to find clips from last season, basically pointless. They beat Fisk 96-66 in their exhibition game. I believe it was an exhibition. Maybe it counts towards their standings. I've never heard of the school Fisk before, but that's who they beat. KenPom has Tennessee State, ranked 304th. Torvik has them at 301. I just kind of diving through the box score, trying to find some little tidbits about them, trying to gather how they may play. They did have 5 guys score in double-digit figures, including Ronald Jessamy, who had a team-high 23 points on 8 of 11 attempts, all of those 2-point attempts. So he's a guy to watch out for in the mid-range game as well as around the rim there. Justice Jackson is their point guard. He led the team in assists. Him and Carlos Williams combined for 18 3-point attempts. So it seems like the ball is moving. They also had 25 assists on 34 made field goals. So much like CSU, probably an unselfish team mindset, looking to share that ball, get multiple guys attempts. They did have 13 turnovers. They also gave up 11 offensive rebounds. That tells me there should be some opportunities for CSU to create not only some second chance opportunities, but also defensively to get some turnovers, to get out and run on this team. I loved the tempo and the pace that the Rams played with in that Monday night win over North Dakota. I feel like getting out in transition is going to be one of this team's biggest strengths, but obviously to be able to do that, that starts with getting stops defensively. You've got a rebound. I thought the rebounding was a lot better on Monday than it was in the exhibition, but I think that's a big key in this one once again. The Rams have a lot of different guys that are going to be able to contribute and score this season, and I'm going to get into that when I get into some of my bold predictions for the season here just momentarily. But I really do feel like playing at tempo is going to be a big key, and whether CSU is able to have some consistency this season. I just think that, especially without Isaiah Stevens, if you're constantly trying to execute out of the half court, could be a little wonky at times. I wouldn't say this is a tremendous 3-point shooting team, although I do feel like they've got probably more shooters top to bottom than they did a year ago. I think the depth as a whole just slightly better, but also, I mean, you're obviously losing your most significant player in program history, a guy who was largely the reason that you were able to make multiple NCAA tournaments over the last couple of years. Roddy was a big factor in that as well. But a nice test for CSU at home. They don't have a super overwhelming home slate in the non-conference portion of the schedule. Most of the big-time matchups, unfortunately, coming away from Moby or at neutral sites. But an opportunity here, hopefully, to establish little bit of momentum, get a win here tonight, move to 2-0. Then you've got DU at home next week, opportunity against a nice local opponent. You don't play UNC this year. You do play CU, so a couple opportunities to pick up some front range wins in the non-conference slate. Again, we'll talk about that more when we get into some of the bold predictions. I want to see the Rams shoot the ball a little bit better than they did in the last one. I felt like the mentality was right. I felt like the ball was moving. Guys were doing a good job of being unselfish to have 25 assists on 35 made field goals in game one. Really, really encouraging start for a team with this many new pieces this season. But you do want to see some of those threes fall with consistency. You certainly want to see them be better at the free throw line than they were in that one. If that starts to become a trend, then that's really going to be worrisome because that can cost you games. I mean, they've got to be better than that. They've got a lot of vets. I'm sure there were some game one nerves involved. Some guys maybe that, like Ethan Morton, for instance, is a guy who wasn't getting to the line a ton last year because he's not getting a ton of offensive opportunities, but he's got size, he's physical. I think he's going to have an opportunity to make or to take advantage, of some smaller players down in the post to get to the line. But you got to capitalize. Same with Jalen Crocker-Johnson. Neek's got to be better at the free throw line. He missed his first three. He was pretty good last year. So, that's an area that I want to see CSU be more consistent. Again, this is a game you should win pretty thoroughly. I mean, if this is one where you let them hang around, that would be a little bit alarming, but I do think that this team is going to be kind of up and down, particularly in the non-conference slate, and we'll get into that more. Good morning to everybody in the Toyota chat. Big shout out to the homie Crackers College Hoops. What's up, Swole? Make sure you guys are tuning in to all of his awesome CSU Hoops content as well. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. I do want to give a little shout out to a couple of former Rams. Isaiah Rivera recently passed 1,000 career points. He was a great kid. I've been rooting for him. It was awesome to see him kind of make a leap at UIC last year. I feel like it was a nice little opportunity for him to, get some confidence back, reinvent himself. He was a great team first player during his time at CSU, but I don't think his career panned out quite like he anticipated. He's really thriving at DePaul. He's averaging 21 points a game over these last two games. It's an early start, but nice start for him. John Tonje as well, currently averaging 18 points a game over two matchups for Wisconsin. Injuries certainly ended up, being a big factor during his time at Mizzou. But it's cool to see a couple of guys that were on that 2022 tournament team, playing well and having some success at their new spots. I think we wish well for all these guys. Deshaun Thomas, all the guys that left the program, rooting for them to be able to do their thing because they were all really good kids. And that's just how the game works today. There's not going to be. I mean, Isaiah Stevens, you get him for 5 years. That was obviously crazy lucky. There's not going to be very much of that. I mean, even Jalen Lake, I just don't think there's going to be a ton of 4 or 5 year guys in programs these days. That's just not really the way it works. But those guys were a part of some big wins while they were here. Happy for them. I'm going to get into 10 bold CSU hoops predictions here in just a second. Real quick, though, I do want to shout out our partners, starting with Toyota, guys. Toyota is awesome. You guys know the deal. Trucks have been a part of their DNA for generations. But what's awesome about Toyota, they've got a little bit of something for everybody. Smooth city rides if you're out and about. If you want to take it in the sticks, you can do that as well. It's nice to be able to have that balance to hit those off-road trails, but still having the convenience of being able to drive it, around town, being able to park it and stuff. That's the thing with some of these SUVs and trucks these days. They're just monstrosities. I'm a big 4Runner fan. I think they are really sharp. I love the new Tacoma. They are just really great, dependable cars, especially for, Colorado living. It's snowing right now. Get you an all-wheel drive vehicle or 4-wheel drive in some cases. They've got 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota, a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Data shows that men are more reluctant to seek healthcare. Shocker. We're a little bit stubborn at times, but that obviously causes worse outcomes. They recommend you get in there every 1 to 3 years just for a little checkup. Make sure your blood pressure is good. Make sure your cholesterol is good. Make sure that you are healthy because you want to be there down the line for your family, for your friends, for those opportunities. I'm telling you guys, we can be stubborn, and I'm a great example of that. I have not always taken the best care of myself, especially the last couple of years. But I'm really trying to emphasize that. I'm trying to think more, not just about what's happening in the moment, but long term. Go to UC Health's dedicated men's health page to see more of these conversations, as well as content and resources for men to take charge of their health at uchealth.org/men's health. Love that message, guys. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Again, don't be dumb. Don't be stubborn. Go get a checkup. You don't have to do it every year necessarily, but make sure you're getting in there, taking care of yourself, doing the right things. Let's give out some predictions for CSU men's basketball. I know the season technically started, but we're only one game in. I needed an opportunity to see some of these guys, see if what they have on the court kind of matches up with what we saw in the videos and the numbers. We were really excited about some of these new additions, but you need to see them in a live game scenario, see how they fit. And while it wasn't perfect, the offense at times looked a little discombobulated. They had some sloppy turnovers early. I felt like they got in a better rhythm as the game went on. It's going to be a process for these guys as they figure out how to play together. I don't think this team, because they don't have Isaiah to depend on, they don't have Roddy, as high as I am on Neat Clifford. I don't think they have that guy that's just going to take over for like a 10 to 15 straight point stretch. It's just not really Neek's game. I do think he's a guy that can attack the hoop and score for you, and also I think be beneficial from a facilitation standpoint, and they're really going to need that. But I just having a guy like Roddy that you could feed in the post, 4 or 5 possessions in a row, going to Isaiah and knowing he's going to knock down a couple threes, in back-to-back possessions. That was just such a valuable commodity for this team. You're in a little bit of a different position right now. You're going to be more dependent on scoring by committee, really doing everything by committee at this point. So let's get into it here. I've got the Rams finishing in the top 4 in the Mountain West. They were picked 7th in the preseason poll. I think they finish right around 3rd or 4th. I think Boise wins the league, but I do think CSU finishes top 4. I think both the Rams and the Aztecs are being a little bit undervalued just based on what they lost. But I mean, man, go watch Miles Bird with SDSU right now and tell me that's not going to be a dangerous team come March. But I think the Rams, especially come February, come March, they're going to be a dangerous group. They've got a lot of veterans on this team, and I do think there's going to be a feel it out process as they, just establish a chemistry together. It's one thing to do it in practice. It's another thing to do it in live game scenarios, to go through, the trials and tribulations of season. That's, one of the things I think a couple of years ago that held that team back. They weren't quite as tough. Last year I felt like the Rams responded after a difficult stretch. But again, like, you don't really know until you see how they handle it. They've got a lot of guys that have played a lot of basketball, but, how do you respond when you get punched in the mouth? I think, they have some struggles at times early on in the Mountain West slate, as well as the non-conference slate. They also have some peaks. It's going to be peaks and valleys type situation. But come February, come March, they're going to be a really dangerous team. I've got CSU winning 21 games prior to the start of the Mountain West tournament. I went through the schedule about 10 times, just kind of trying to go through scenarios in my head. Obviously, it's all a crapshoot at this point of the year. Usually averaged out around, 19 to 20 wins. I think I got as high as 22 one time when I did it. We're going to say they win 21 games. I'm going to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt with this coaching staff, but I do think like 19 to 21, that's kind of going to be right where you're at. And then if you can win a couple of games in the Mountain West tournament, we'll see what happens there. I've got CSU beating CU in Boulder. I would say that game in Boulder 2 years ago is about the worst that the Rams have looked in the Nico Medved era. Dion came into the building. There was a ton of energy. It was kind of crazy to see, to be honest. And the game just got away from CSU. They were sloppy. The effort wasn't there. I mean, I felt like they kind of quit in that game, and that's not really something that has happened very frequently with this team. And again, like going back to what I said just a couple of seconds ago, how do you respond during those tough scenarios? Boulder's going to be a tough matchup. That's a game, if you're CU, you desperately want to win, because frankly, you're in the best hoops league in America now. And that Big 12 slate is going to be a gauntlet. If you're the Rams, you're looking to win. You're for the second year in a row, get a little bit of revenge for the last time you go to Boulder. I think CSU pulls it out. I think it's going to be a really tight game. I'm going to say Neek goes for like 15 points and 13 boards. You know he's going to be amped for it. He's going to be, flying all over the place, attacking the glass with a lot of tenacity. But I think the Rams win that one and probably drop Washington and Ole Miss. I think VCU is a bit of a coin flip. I've got them losing it as of now. But I think if you could go 2-2 in those 4 matchups in the non-conference slate, that really sets you up nicely. Obviously, what you did last year in the non-conference slate was incredible a couple years ago as well. But I just think realistically, Great Osobor is going to be a tough matchup. I really thought we weren't going to have to play that dude again. It's a bummer that it panned out that way. I think Sprinkle's a really good coach too. And obviously much more familiarity with CSU than normally you would be in that spot playing a team like Washington, although they had played Washington of late. So it's not like it would be a total secret there. A different staff though. I've got the Rams losing at San Diego State and then in Laramie. There's a really tough stretch in the conference slate where CSU goes to Viejas. They then go to Laramie and they host Boise State after that. That is a brutal 3-game stretch, probably the toughest 3-game stretch of the entire schedule. I think CSU starts hot and plays pretty well early on in the conference slate, racks up a couple wins, although I think they probably lose at Nevada to begin. But I do think that just going to Viejas, odds are it's not a place you win very frequently. And, this CSU has struggled a little bit in Laramie. They've lost there 3 years in a row, even to bad teams. It's just a tough place to play. It's why San Diego State never wants to go there. But I've got CSU losing to San Diego State, losing to Wyoming, and back-to-back road games. Everybody flips out. The sky is falling. Oh, God, this team's not a legitimate contender. And then they come back to Moby and bounce back with a big-time win over Boise State at home. I do think Boise is going to be a handful, and they look the part early on. They've got a ton of experience. I thought adding Cardenas in the portal was exactly what they needed. A facilitator to put around, that size you have in the post as well as the wings that they have. That's a really good team. If you could split with them, that would be absolutely massive. You also conclude the regular season with a trip to Boise, potentially with the Mountain West title on the line for them. I've got the Rams, though. I've got them splitting with Boise. I've got them sweeping Air Force, sweeping Fresno, sweeping San Jose State, and then I think they sweep one of New Mexico or UNLV. I think the Lobos are going to be really good. I do wonder defensively, could they be a little bit of a liability? I wonder UNLV, while I really like Dean Thomas. Offensively, do you have enough pieces there? I flipped a coin. We landed with the Lobos, but I'm going to say that they sweep Air Force, Fresno, and San Jose State. Surprisingly, New Mexico, and then they split with Nevada, Wyoming, San Diego State, Boise State, UNLV, and Utah State. Ultimately finish 14-6 in the 20-game Mountain West slate. Like I said, I've got them at 21 wins in the regular season prior to the start of the Mountain West tournament. If you lose that game to Washington, I think you win the consolation game on Black Friday. But that's where we're at. This one is one of the more bold ones. I'm going to say CSU gets into the NCAA tournament, but they do so by winning the Mountain West tournament for the first time since 2003. I think they would probably be on the outside looking in just based on their regular season results. I'm going to say a team with this many veterans gets hot at the right time. They win it in Vegas. They get to the NCAA tournament that way behind big performances from Nate Clifford. It wouldn't surprise me if you had like a big scoring night from a Kashawn Williams or from a Bowen Bourne. I think those two guys are going to be instrumental to CSU if the Rams are able to have some success this year. And that brings me to my next bold prediction, which is that the Rams will have the Mountain West Six-Man of the Year. I think you could make an argument that it'll be Kashawn based on what we saw. I think Bowen Bourne looked really good. He had 7 assists. I didn't see that coming. The shot looks good. He looks like a natural fit. I think he's going to have 2 or 3 opportunities a game just in transition to pull up from deep. And if he can hit those, That's really going to be big for the Rams. Again, I think transition offense, much more so than the last couple of years, is going to be a big factor for CSU. I want to see them play with tempo. I want to see them run on teams. And I think that's what the staff wants to see as well, kind of based on what we saw Monday night against North Dakota. And I think that makes a lot of sense with the length and with the athleticism that you have on the roster. But yeah, I've got CSU winning the Mountain West tournament for the first time in 21 years, or I guess it would be 22 years by the spring. And I have the Rams having the Mountain West sixth man of the year, either Keshawn Williams or Bowen Bourne. I do think you could also make the argument that both of those guys being highly impactful and having nice production maybe hurts each other's case, and they kind of split the vote. But we'll see what happens there. Again, I really like this Rams bench unit. I think they have an opportunity to be versatile, and I like the experience that they're able to bring off the bench. It's just not it's not a position the Rams have been in that much these last couple of years. Neek, I've got him finishing first team all conference and ultimately being a top 20 pick in the NBA draft. I just think that if he can build off of what he showed offensively last year, defensively, athletically, I mean, he's got an NBA body, he's got NBA athleticism. Like, I think it's all there. It's just kind of putting it together a little bit more, showing off some of those passing skills, showing off that you're a guy that can stretch the floor with consistency, because what you bring to the table defensively and on the glass is certainly NBA caliber. But I think he's going to have a really nice year this year and ultimately win over an NBA team, go top 20. I think it's probably somewhere in that like 18, 19, 20 range. I don't think he's going to be a lottery pick or something like that. But it also wouldn't shock me if he had an ascension and, a team just falls in love with him. Because, again, it's all there. He is definitely an NBA caliber player. It's just a matter of what's his draft stock going to be by the time the season is done. But I think a lot like Roddy, especially just because of, what he brings to the table athletically, I think a team talks themselves into him. And the Rams have another first-round pick, which would be great for the program, as would, getting to the NCAA tournament. We hear so much about sustainability and like when do you start to expect more? Little by little, as you get to more tournaments, as you produce more NBA draft picks, that's what elevates you as a program. That's how San Diego State got to where they were at under Steve Fisher. But again, that's a process that took well over a decade. And I know that in the modern era, we want that validation now, but just continuing within this continuity, it's going to work if you can hang on to these coaches and keep building. We've already seen it work. I mean, they're night and day from where this program was when they took over. But I really do think like CSU could be, on par with a San Diego State, a Boise State that's just making the tournament, year after year. And we've seen CSU and Boise really, really step it up these last couple of years on the basketball side. I think bold prediction, CSU will win a game on a buzzer beater. They will also lose a game by 15 plus points. That's just how the season goes. It's long. There's going to be a night where the Rams are sluggish. Maybe you're down a guy from injuries or something like that. The shots just aren't falling. The turnovers start to add up. You end up getting your ass kicked. It happens. Good teams get blown out too. But I do think they win a game on a buzzer beater. I was going to try and call my shot. I want to give myself a little bit of wiggle room on that one. But I could see like Bowen Bourne, pulling up from deep in Moby, hitting a big shot. Keshawn Williams as well. But again, I've got the Rams winning on a buzzer beater, but also losing a game by 15 plus at some point this year. I think Neek is the only player that averages double-digit figures. I think he could flirt with averaging a double-double. It's going to be right there. If he doesn't do it, it's going to be really close. But then I think you have 5 other players that basically average in that 7 to 9 points a game type range. Jalen Lake, Crocker Johnson, all those guys. Maybe one of them's able to branch out a little bit, get it more like 11, 12 points a game. But when it comes to the scoring output, when it comes to rebounding, I mean, this is going to be a by committee approach, and it's going to take a village for this team to have success. Finally, and I don't think they're going to have as many opportunities as they did a year ago, so you're going to have to capitalize. We'll say CSU beats a ranked opponent again. I don't know if you're going to beat another top 10 team, but I do think they beat another top 25 team and continue to add to what's been an impressive resume that's grown by the year under Medved and co. I'm excited, man. I think there's a lot of possibility with this team. I think the schedule has a little bit more balance than it did a season ago. I've talked about that already, so I don't want to get too repetitive, but just that, you don't have these long 3-4 game road stretches. You don't have outside of the one I mentioned with San Diego State and Laramie, and then hosting Boise State. Like, it doesn't feel like you have these just totally daunting stretches where if you were to go 1-3, you would feel good. I like the balance. I like the home and aways. I like how it kind of works out with playing a couple of down teams and playing a couple of good teams. I think there's an opportunity for this group to get in a rhythm as the season progresses. And again, I think they're going to be a lot better come March than they are right now. And they looked pretty good on Monday night. I thought that was a better than expected performance against a North Dakota team that I think is better than how they maybe looked in that one. We are going to flip it over to football here. We're going to set the scene for the border war. I'm going to play a video here for you in just a second of Chase Wilson and Dane Olson kind of talking about the border war, the team's mindset. Real quick, though, I want to talk to you about choosing a chill mindset. Coors Light encourages you to do so. Guys, life is chaotic between work, between everything in your personal life. It gets stressful. It adds up. And, frankly, it's all about how you choose to respond to that. You just want to make sure you choose chill. You want to be the type of guy that's fun to be around. You want to be the life of the party. You don't want to be the Debbie Downer, so when life throws lemons your way, make a little bit of lemonade. If the barbecue gets rained out, that's all right. Turn it into a dance party inside. It's all about how you choose your chill mindset each and every day. When you're kicking back, when you're relaxing, then crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it's as cold as the Rockies. Cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for that smooth finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also want to shout out Raising Cane's. You're going to want to race in there, turbocharge your order for delicious cooked or just feckin' chicken fingers, the crinkle cut fries, the cane sauce, that Texas toast. You cannot go wrong with Raising Cane's. And again, they're always cooked to order and made for you. So you know that you're getting them hot, you're getting them fresh. Find your local Raising Cane's location or order online or mobile. In Fort Collins, obviously just right off of College there. For cooked-to-order hand-battered chicken fingers, race into Raising Cane's. Turbocharge your chicken fingers. Get them even faster by ordering online at raisingcanes.com or through the mobile app, Raising Cane's Chicken Finger, One Love. All right, we are going to play this video here of Chase Wilson and Dane Olson, almost kind of blended their names together. They are going to set the scene for the border war, kind of talk about the team's mindset going into this one. And then I'm going to talk about the matchup a little bit as well. There is a lot at stake for the Rams in this one. But again, here is Chase Wilson and Dane Olson meeting with the media on Wednesday afternoon.
Curious for both of you, you look back to last year, you had a bye week 2 and then played 11 straight. This year, your second bye week. How different has it been? How nice has this schedule been in terms of where the byes have fallen and how that's helped your bodies?
Me and Dane were also talking, 5-6 years of football takes a wear and tear. So it's very nice to have these spread out the way that they are. And I think to go with that also, this is not an off week for us. We have a huge game next week and a huge opportunity. So while this has been a nice week to not play as physical of a game, we've taken practice the same way we would preparing for a game. As Dane was talking about, our practice habits are why we're reaping success. So we need to stay true to that process.
So off that is a bye week, but the next week is the border war. When do those emotions start to kick in, and exactly can you verbalize what those emotions are that Wyoming brings out of you guys?
I think they started to kick in for me as soon as the Nevada game was over. I talked to the guys a little bit before practice today, but bigger than us or even the people. This is a historic rivalry game. I think our guys really understand what this game means. Some of the emotions, I don't know if I'm able to voice those, but I'm excited for this one.
How much do you think about, obviously, like
this game counts the same as any other conference game, but clearly it means so much more to that. Like, is that a tough balance to strike of wanting to emphasize that this one means more, but also not getting too into it, if that makes sense?
I think just like Chase was talking about, the emotions for the older guys in the room or on the team already kicked in this week, and it's about getting the new guys, the transfers and the freshmen, really ready for this game. And I don't think, like, talked about it being a playoff run for us, and we know how important this game is, and I don't think there's imbalance in that. And the team just knows that take one win at a time, and the rest will take care of itself.
You guys do talk about taking it 1 week at a time, but you are also talking about if we win out, this is what we can get, that grand prize. How do you compartmentalize each week knowing that there's that grand scheme?
You can't ever get to the grand prize if you can't what you handle right in front of you.
Yeah.
So I think you can have the end goal in mind, kind of like you're saying. You can know what that goal is at the end of the tunnel, but you're not getting to the end of that tunnel unless you handle what's the business that you have right in front of you. So that's what we focus on each week.
All right, I like the mindset. They're not giving Wyoming any bulletin board material or anything like that. Some of the stuff we saw before the CU game, but being honest about the fact that there is more emotion in this one. And I've debated this many times with many CSU fans over the year. Who is CSU's biggest rival? Is it CU? Is it Wyoming? I think historically Wyoming has meant a lot more. Obviously, when you talk about the history, and I'm going to talk about all of it, it's just one of the most unique rivalries in all sports. I understand that, especially in the 21st century, I would say that there's been a little bit more juice in the CSU-CU games. And obviously last year you could just put kerosene on it and drop a match. But this is a game that means a whole lot to a whole lot of people, especially those that have, supported CSU for decades. If I could encourage any of the younger Ram fans out there, it's to embrace the history, to go back and learn about some of the intense moments. I mean, we're talking brawls in the stands. We're talking, killing each other's mascots. Like, there is genuine hatred between CSU and Wyoming, and this is a rivalry that is rooted a whole lot deeper than just football. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's kind of a culture war, a clash of style. I mean, I think the way that CSU fans kind of view Boulder, which is, maybe pretentious and snooty, a little up their own ass. I think that Wyoming kind of feels the same way about CSU. And that's just kind of how this process works. I have this whole theory about the circle of hate. And if you want to go all the way down the line, Wyoming considers CSU to be their biggest rival. CSU, a lot of people consider CU to be their biggest rival. They look down on Wyoming, but if you ask CU, they're going to say their biggest rival is Nebraska, and they kind of look down on CSU. And if you're Nebraska, they kind of look down on CU, and then their biggest rival back in the day was Oklahoma, whose biggest rival is Texas, and so on and so forth. It goes on and on, all of that highly subjective. But this is one that has a whole lot of history and is just unique. The Rams 59, 51, and 5 all time, depending on who you ask. CSU does not technically count the 1899 matchup, as it was deemed a forfeit by Wyoming. The NCAA does not officially recognize forfeits. So if you look in the CSU record books, it'll actually say 58, 51, and 5 all time. Wyoming still counts it as a loss. It looks better for CSU, so I'm going to count it. Wyoming has won 3 in a row. They have won 7 of the last 8 overall. They have really dominated this series of late. They do not have an opportunity to make a bowl game this year, but that they would love nothing more than to come into your stadium, to rain all over your parade, and kill your opportunity to compete for a conference title game. I mean, this is Wyoming's Super Bowl every year, and I don't say that dismissively. I think a lot of people say that, and they mean it. They mean it snarkily. I don't. I love how much that this game means to Wyoming, because this is what college football is all about two fan bases that absolutely hate each other, about 2 teams that desperately want to beat each other, that are going to lay it all out on the field. It's so much bigger than just football. They've played every single season since 1946, guys. we're closing in on 80 consecutive seasons through Vietnam, through the wars in the Middle East in the last 30 years, the various ones. There've been multiple, but nothing has slowed down this rivalry in a really long time. In the last 125 years, only 12 times have CSU and Wyoming not played. And that was because of like World War I and World War II. They played through COVID. They played through it all, whether they were in the same league or not. This is a game that each and every year for over a century has mattered a whole lot to both of these communities. Only 60 miles between us. I love this one. It's everything that makes college football special, between the bronze boot, which is one of the more epic trophies in college football, both just aesthetically, it looks really cool, but also the history, Vietnam veteran, Lieutenant Dan Romero, his boot, the fact that they played for it every year since 68. I mean, there's so much wrapped up in this one. And I think it's easy to focus, on what's happened recently and have a little bit of recency bias and kind of ignore everything that goes into this CSU matchup. But this is one where if both teams were winless, but they beat the other, in some ways, I think some fans would be like, it was an awful year, but at least we got that one. That's a win. They can go to sleep at night and rest easy. And I think that's basically where a lot of Wyoming fans are at for this season. Like it certainly has been a big disappointment. They have not been able to maintain as of yet, what Craig Bohl was able to establish there. But if they come in and they beat CSU again, yeah, it's still a pretty good year for them. And if you're the Rams, that's a tricky spot because, not only have you lost 7 out of your last 8 to this team, kind of gotten bullied by them, now you're in a position where, they've got basically nothing to lose. I mean, the bronze boot, they want to retain it, but I mean, their season's already over with. They're playing for pride at this point. And if you're the Rams, you're playing for respect. You're playing for a shot, hopefully, in the Mountain West Championship game. Like it's kind of a tricky spot, much like when they went to Air Force, where despite the fact that all the series history of late says that, you should be skeptical of the Rams in this one, based on how things have played out this year, like the expectation is going to be that CSU wins this game. They're going to be favored, potentially even by like close to a touchdown. I'm not great at predicting the spreads, but I would think, it would be at least 4.5, 5 points, maybe. Maybe they give a little bit of a respect to Wyoming because they've figured some things out offensively. Their last 5 games, they've been a lot more competitive, and, in their defense, they have just been brutalized by injuries this year. It's been a tough spot for them. They did get Harrison Whaley back. I expect that he'll play against CSU. He had 170 yards against New Mexico and a touchdown. Their stud running back has missed most of the year. Apparently is going to play in 4 games and then redshirt, come back next year, is what he says. They switched to Caden Anderson under center from Evans Svoboda. Caden Anderson threw for 342 and 3 touchdowns against UNM. Neither team was interested in playing defense in that game, and it reminded me a lot of why, going into that matchup against New Mexico, I talked about not wanting it to turn into, a shootout, because that's where New Mexico is really comfortable. And I thought CSU did a really good job of keeping them off balance. You've got to credit Wyoming for finding a way to put 49 on the board, but especially defensively, man, that was just, it was sloppy. Like I think the CSU loss might have been the final dagger in UNM, but we'll see. Despite the lack of success this season, Wyoming does have a lot of experience, particularly in the trenches. They lost Frank Crum, who's obviously on the Broncos now, but they returned 4 or 5 starting offensive linemen. They've got, on paper, one of the better defensive lines in the conference, one of the more experienced units. They've got good linebackers. They've had some injuries in the secondary. They've been a little bit susceptible there. But, I mean, this is a team that's going to play hard. They've got a lot of vets on their roster, and they're going to come into your building, looking to rain all over your parade. If you're CSU, you got to stick with what you've been doing. You got to run the ball. You've got to continue to win the turnover margin. 2 straight games of turnover-free football. Looking to go 3 straight for what I believe would be the first time in the 21st century. You're looking to get that bronze boot back. Guys, there is nothing like the feeling of when you beat your biggest rival and you get to sprint across the field. You get to take that trophy, just rip it from them, celebrate in their faces. I mean, that's me holding the bronze boot back in 2014. I mean, there were a couple of dudes on this roster, like Chase Wilson, like Dane Olson, that were around in 2020 that got to hold the bronze boot. But I mean, when you think about it, because this staff wasn't here, because most of these players weren't here, I've touched that trophy way more than just about anybody in the program has in 2024. And that's because Wyoming has absolutely owned us. They've kicked our ass for the majority of the last decade. And we owe them a little bit of payback. The Rams owe them an ass whooping, frankly. I mean, they owe them a 2013, 2014, 2015 type win. Those were some of my favorite moments. Before we get out of here, I figured I'd just kind of throw out a couple of those moments. Being able to hold the bronze boot in 2013, 2014, man, that meant more to me. I got to touch the Stanley Cup a couple years ago. That was really cool. Don't get me wrong. At Breckenridge Brewery, it was an awesome event. A big shout out to Breck. But man, when I held that bronze boot, and granted, I've always been a CSU guy. The Wyoming games always meant a ton to me. But I mean, it was overwhelming because I knew the history, man. I knew what that game meant to so many people. I mean, myself included. And I was so proud when I worked for the team, back under McElwain, because man, like the Rams were up for those rivalry games. It meant something to them to, bully their rival. And I think back to 2013, you're 2-4 after a gut-wrenching loss to San Jose State, and they go up into Laramie and they just thump them. I mean, 55-25 or something like that. They won by like 30. Capri went for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. Grayson threw 3 touchdowns. Shaq had a pick. I mean, we kicked their butt. Then the following year, the score, it ended up being like 45-31, but it was 31-3 halfway through the third quarter. I mean, under McElwain, much like under, Sonny Lubick, CSU kind of beat down Wyoming. Actually, the last 5 wins have weirdly been double-digit wins. You have an opportunity here to kind of reverse the trend, and to get more buy-in. I think at this point, some of the skepticism regarding some of the wins that CSU has pulled out, it's fair to say they have not looked their best when the lights have shined brightest. When you look at like how they performed in the non-conference slate against Texas and CU, and then even Oregon State, where you did a whole lot better, you were the better team, but you found a way to beat themselves. You beat yourself. This is an opportunity for you to take care of business in a game that's going to mean a whole lot to the community. I mean, you win this one, you beat 2 rivals in the first year since 2015. That's significant, guys. That's really significant. You would obviously keep your Mountain West Championship hopes alive at that point. Like, there is just so much at stake for this team. I've loved the mindset and the mentality. I've loved the fight that we've seen the Rams over recent weeks. But you got to go into this one. You got to play with composure. I think back to the game in Laramie, the last couple of trips to Laramie have just been disastrous, but last year especially, sloppy game, turned the ball over too much, gave up big explosive plays. The Rams have done a good job of preventing a lot of those things in recent weeks, but now, this is different. This is the border war. It's Friday night with the bronze boot on the line. I imagine there's going to be, 35,000+ fans. Like, I think they're already at 90% tickets sold. Anticipate it'll be a sellout, because even if they don't sell it, you just give it to the students and let them turn out. But this is a big one. This is one of the biggest games in Canvas Stadium history, frankly, just because of the fact that since the stadium has opened, you have not gotten to play that many relevant games in November that really mattered in the grand scheme of things. It's a playoff mindset. The players said it, Norvell said it. You keep winning, you have an opportunity to accomplish something that this program has never accomplished, which is win the Mountain West Championship game. Won or split 3 conference titles between 99 and 02. But have not even made the title game since it was introduced in 2013. This is what you compete for. You want to make November a month to remember. You want to make November a month to remember. I wrote about that. Go check it out. We've had like 6 or 7 diehard articles this week between CSU and Hoops. I'll have more coverage tonight. I'll have an audio-only podcast coming out with Kevin Lytle, as well as a post-game recap podcast this weekend. All kinds of CSU content coming your way. Make sure everybody is staying warm out there. Stay safe, y'all. Much love. I am always proud to be. Peace.